Well, happy Tuesday morning to you. Pastor Chris Haughee here from Desert Springs Covenant Church with another devotional from Traumatic Triumph. Here we are on a Tuesday, and we are continuing in the book of Hebrews for today's reading. But our recentering activity that's suggested in the devotional is a variation on the deep breath exercise. And it's one that involves kind of pursing your lips to blow the air out more slowly. You may envision blowing bubbles, or if you're watching this someplace and you have some bubbles, could be fun to take a break and blow some bubbles. Who knows? I don't know when you're viewing this and what's possible. And I take the risk of looking a little bit silly as I do my deep breaths while pursing my lips, but here we go. Slowing down your breath as you purse your lips. Let's do that one more time. If you want to do some more breathing, you can pause and continue on and then join when you're all done. All right, so boldly approach. We're going to take a look at Hebrews chapter 4, starting at verse 14 and reading through to chapter 5, verse 10. I'll be reading from the New International Reader's Version. We have a great high priest. He has gone up into heaven. He is Jesus, the Son of God. So let us hold firmly to what we say we believe. We have a high priest who can feel it when we are weak and hurting. We have a high priest who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, but he did not sin. So let us boldly approach God's throne of grace. Then we will receive mercy. We will find grace to help us when we need it. Every high priest is chosen from among the people. He is appointed to act for the people. He acts for them in whatever has to do with God. He gives gifts and sacrifices for their sins. Some people have gone astray without knowing it. He is able to deal gently with them. He can do that because he himself is weak. That's why he has to offer sacrifices for his own sins. He must also do it for the sins of the people. And no one can take this honor for himself. Instead, he receives it when he is appointed by God. That is just how it was for Aaron. It was the same for Christ. He did not take for himself the glory of becoming a high priest, but God said to him, "You are my son. Today I have become your father." Psalm 2, verse 7. In another place, God said, "You are a priest forever, just like Melchizedek." Psalm 110, verse 4. Jesus prayed while he lived on earth. He made his appeal with sincere cries and tears. He prayed to God, who could save him from death. God answered Jesus because he truly honored God. Jesus was God's son. But by suffering, he learned what it means to obey. In this way, he was made perfect. Eternal salvation comes from him. He saves all those who obey him. God appointed him to be the high priest, just like Melchizedek. As we reflect on this passage today, obedience, it can be a tough word for anyone affected by trauma. Abusive relationships often demanded obedience. Great physical, psychological, and relational harm has been done under the guise of obedience. I developed a tenuous relationship with trust and authority figures because of how I learned obedience growing up, and I know I am not the only one. Therefore, hearing about the connection between suffering and obedience in the context of Jesus' perfection as our Savior is a delicate subject. I won't pretend that it isn't. One thing that I appreciate about a trauma-informed approach to ministry is that it doesn't shy away from the hard things, those things that might trigger a strong emotional or physical response from those that are trauma affected. Instead, It exposes the root of what we might otherwise see as impulse, reactionary, or even a moral failing. Once we see that our reactions to the past hurt we have endured predispose us to various behaviors when confronted with certain stimuli in the present, we can equip ourselves to respond differently. With this insight, we know better and can do better, as a colleague of mine once said. I would take it one step further, suggesting that when we understand our triggers, we are able to do a little better in response. Then we know that we are capable of acting the way that we want, not just reacting. So we end up doing better in order to know better, gaining a sense of agency and empowerment. Now, one last thought about the difficult subject of obedience. I like to think of obedience as a tool. Just like a physical tool, such as a hammer, can be used as a weapon, obedience as a tool can be weaponized by evil. Jesus' obedience was entered into willingly, not compelled. Obedience that is compelled by threat of violence is not what God intends for his kingdom people. We become more Christ-like as we truly embrace suffering as something that we take on through our own volition, not as an unwilling victim. Unpacking all of this can be very complicated, and if this is an area of woundedness for you, the subject of obedience and suffering, I strongly suggest that you reach out to a trained therapist, especially one that's trained in trauma response. Confidence in the face of suffering is our goal. We can boldly approach God for mercy because of Christ's obedience, his willing sacrifice on our behalf. The confidence we have is because of our willingness to accept that grace that is given us, that we accept it. Our willingness to accept that gift is undoubtedly the most important act of obedience in our lives. Remember, God's grace goes with you today, healing wounds and opening doors to mercy. God bless you. Other passages for contemplation today would be Psalm 32 again, and also Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 through 16. Hope to see you tomorrow.